welcome. I'll give you a bit of an insight into sort of who we are, and we'll run through a bit of a step-by-step process, giving you lots of helpful information and tips and things to be mindful of with the potential move to France. I understand people will be in different stages of the move, whether you're just thinking about moving to France, in the process, already in France. I'm sure you'll get some useful information here. We have a great panel of experts on today's call. Let's see if my slide works. Here we go, some nice headshots of the team today. So as you can see there, on the left, myself, Remy Hart. I am a senior wealth manager at Holborn Assets. I'll give you a bit of an insight to who Holborn are shortly. We've got Eleanor joining us from Paris today.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining today, Eleanor. She's head of French department. And Muna, who's stepped in at somewhat of a last minute. We have your colleague and fellow tax attorney on maternity leave. Was she poorly or?
Exactly.
A bit of both. So thanks for joining today, Muna, again on short notice. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And my well-esteemed colleague, Jacob, over in Valencia. How are you, Jacob?
Doing great, Remy. Excited to be here once again.
I thought you were going to say excited to come to Malaga tomorrow and see me, but there we go.
that too.
Okay, so a little bit about Holborn Assets. For those of you who don't know us as a company, we're one of the largest wealth management companies globally. We specialize in various different financial planning aspects regarding savings, investments, pensions, retirement planning, tax planning, estate planning, property investment. The list sort of goes on. But we've been around since 1998. Lexity, who I've just briefly introduced, are one of our sort of formal partners. It's great to have such strong, reputable partners in the industry that we work in. I myself do a lot of work for expats in France, as does Jacob, mainly sort of myself being British and European clients, and Jacob predominantly specializes in US connected clients in France. So we operate in 150 countries globally. We have 18 international offices, 20,000 clients, a few billion of assets under management. All nice figures, but I'm based in the Spanish office. I head up the office down here in Malaga. We have offices in Portugal, Cyprus, Asia, and the rest of the world. We don't have a physical presence in France, but given my experience, I do a lot of work with clients in France, and we have a bit of a team that specializes in expats in France. So we'll give you a bit of an insight into that shortly. As I said, today's webinar is a little bit about the process of moving to France. I think this slide says why choose France. You probably don't need to hear that from myself. Sat in my Spanish office on why moving to France. I am going to France in a couple of weeks to see clients in the Southwest, but I think you can make your own mind up on the reasons. I guess the one that stands out for me and the conversations I have quite regularly is cost of living. Even where I am, it's significantly cheaper than perhaps a lot of places like the UK, Ireland, the US. And it sort of forms part of our financial planning around budgeting and income analysis and outgoings. As far as lifestyle, the food, the wine, yeah, that can sort of speak for itself. There's still millions of people coming to France annually. I'm sure the guys at Lexity are very busy with inquiries, as are we. We'll kick it off with immigration. It's always a really good starting point because to get into the country, visa immigration is a starting point. And I'll pass it over to you, Eleanor, if that's okay. But ideally, just to give people a bit of an understanding on what the process is, how you can help, and what potential options are.
Of course, thank you very much for this introduction and for inviting us once again. It's wonderful to be here with you and Jacob and Muna this time. So we have a lot of different visa types in France. Here, I try to break them down as much as possible to make it easy for you to, but we can say that there are different categories. Let's start with the short stay visa. If you don't plan to renew your stay in France, to stay here long term, you do not want to be a tax resident or live in France on a permanent basis. In this case, we have different short stay visas. Of course, the famous Schengen visa for tourism or for people that come to France for less than 90 days. We have different types of business visas if you're invited to a business event or if you come here for work without having to stay more than 90 days in France. Also, student or interns visa if you don't plan to continue all your studies in France, but just come for a brief exchange, and the famous medical visa that can be longer than 90 days, but is also in the category of the short one. In terms of long stay visas, we have many different of them, but the main idea is that you can stay more than 90 days, more than 6 months, sometimes more than 1 year, and it's renewable on a yearly basis. I'll start with the very famous visitor visa. It's our best-selling product. Everyone wants to apply for the visitor visa. Why? Because it's quite easy to meet the requirements. Basically, you have only three different requirements. You need to have a medical coverage, enough savings or income to support your stay, and not be working in the country. So as you can see, it's quite easy to meet those conditions, and you get a 1-year renewable visa. And then I would like to mention the different working visa types that we have. And also we can break them in two categories. Either you're a freelancer, an entrepreneur, company owner, and you want to establish your business in France or be able to work as a freelance here. But you also have different visas for employees, and depending on your income and other conditions, you can have one of the famous talent visas or another employee visa. I'm mentioning the talent visa, which is a ad hoc category of visa. We call them a little bit like the premium visa that you can have. Why? Because you can bring your family with you, and they have the right to work, which is very different than with other residency permit types. And you can have up to 4-year residency, which is very interesting because you don't have to renew it on a yearly basis and be stressed every year with the terrible French administrative process. And last but not least, we have the family and private stay visas. If you're lucky enough to be married to a French person or to a European person, you can apply for a long stay visa and be able to work in France without having to apply for the authorization, which is very different than the work visas that before getting them, you need to go through the lengthy process of getting the work authorization. Either you're an employee or an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, it's more or less the same. And we have other family visa type, depending if you have children or spouse that live in France. I'm not going to overcomplicate things. I think you have a long list already, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have around those different options.
That's a very good point, and something I might have missed as far as any housekeeping. We have a question and answers box on the screen, so feel free to jot down any questions throughout the seminar today, and we'll try our best to cover off as much as we can at the end. A nice point on, I have a lot of conversations with especially British expats, and they're trying to dig for some sort of Irish family member in their life. I don't think it's going to sit well if they try and marry a French person, because depending on the period of their life, normally already covered. As far as process, Eleanor, people to reach out and sort of work out their individual situation and what's going to be best for them, right?
Yes, of course. Well, feel free to reach out, and we offer a first free of charge consultation, so you can perfectly ask all the questions that you want. And yes, well, it really depends on the personal situation, but the main questions you have to ask yourself is whether you want to live in France for a long term or not. So you know if you want to apply for a renewable visa or not, and if you want to work or not. If you want to work either as an employee or as a freelance, those are the main questions that you need to ask yourself. And then depending on the answers, we can direct you to one or the other visa type.
You can do the rest. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Eleanor. I appreciate that update. It's certainly the go-to person for anyone with immigration questions or issues, and apologies for bombarding your emails on a weekly basis. Muna, as I said, really appreciate you stepping in last minute, and I don't know if it's your first webinar, but
yeah, it is my first webinar, but I'm really happy to be here.
I appreciate that. Well,
thank you for having us.
We're just having a chat, and we're just sort of trying to relay information. So tax is obviously a big subject, and I'm sure we'll have a few questions on that at the end. Just want to get an idea of what people should be mindful of when sort of pre-planning their move to France from a tax perspective, and then give us a bit of an insight into what you guys do on a daily basis and how you support people in France.
Okay, so I start by saying whatever visa you have, tax is always there is always tax implication. Even if you have a visitor visa, you still might consider it as a tax resident in France. So let's clarify that, and to be considered a tax resident in France, there is basically mostly 3 criteria, and then the fourth if that you don't fill in the third 3 first criteria. So first one is you have an economic your economic environment is settled in France, meaning like your investment, your place of business is in France. The second is a professional criteria, meaning like you are working as an employee in France. The third criteria would be a personal criteria, meaning that you have a home, a permanent house, and your family is there with your children and your partners. If you might be in one of these 3 criteria, then you might be considered as a French tax resident. If not, if France is the place where you spend most of your time on a calendar year, meaning, for example, if you spend 4 months in France and 3 months in Italy and 3 months in Spain, or 2 months and 2 months in the UK, with these 4 countries, France was the place where you spend most of your time on a calendar year. So France, in this scenario, will still consider you as a French tax resident. So if you are a French tax resident, unfortunately, there is a lot of tax implication, meaning that your worldwide income will be taxed in France. You might be also subject to what we call wealth tax on your real estate assets if they are estimated over 1.3 million. You also might be subject to inheritance and gift tax if you receive inheritance or gifts. And also capital gains, of course, which is part of your worldwide income. So capital gains, either a global investment or property sale, also might be taxed in France. So we usually we have the tendency of people who are planning to come to France and settling down in France. We usually advise them to organize their assets before coming to France, especially if they own properties overseas, because it's basically easier to start selling the house before becoming a French tax resident. So in Lixity, we help you organize your coming into France, either on the immigration side with Eleanor, but also on the tax side with me. So let's say you avoid paying double, but also being smart about taxes either in France or in the country you're living in. And we also help you file in your tax return, because sometimes people have tendency to forget that the moment you arrive to France and might be considered as a French tax resident, you need to file in your taxes, even if you have 0 income. It's mandatory in France. So we help navigate the tax returns.
Perfect. Well, it's certainly something to keep an eye on, and you know, even like myself in Spain, I haven't filled a tax return in myself. I have an accountant who does that, and would highly recommend someone like yourself just to make sure the boxes are ticked and everything's doing correctly. So things that I picked up on that, arguably painting France as a bit of a scary tax burden of a place. It's funny, I had this conversation with a client recently who was sort of put off by the idea of Spain, France, even Portugal as tax unfavorable jurisdictions. There's quite a lot of assets, quite a lot of income. That's again predominantly where myself and Jacob come in, perhaps more myself compared to the US assets. But look, as far as getting taxed on your worldwide income, we specialize in the wealth tax structuring of assets. The main points here to be mindful of are really prior to the move. I'll touch on pensions, but as far as your main residence, let's say you have a house in the US, a house in the UK, and you're planning to sell it, the advice generally is to sell that as a UK or a US tax resident. You may be exempt from capital gains tax or have some exemptions, whatever state you're in. France will tax you as worldwide income, right? I'm not a qualified tax advisor, I'm a qualified financial advisor. We work very closely with the likes of Lexity to, what's the word? I can give you a basis of an advice, but the formal advice has to come from a qualified tax accountant. So, Mona, that's really good. I might jump in with the odd question here and there. I think that moves us nicely on to how you sort of establish your wealth. Obviously, buying a house in France, we between us have various different estate agents and people we can pass on contact details for, as well as sort of notaires and lawyers to help assist with that process. But essentially getting a visa, getting the right immigration status, pre-tax planning is key. Then we can obviously reevaluate your assets and how they're currently structured. So this really talks about UK expats. We can include this is a slide that probably should include Europeans and most other countries in the world outside of the US. Jacob's here for that specific conversation, but there's really good tools. And we mentioned France taxing worldwide income and having various sort of progressive rates on tax. Now, I view France as a great place for financial planning. There's certain jurisdictions where, we can set up investments, great, but there's so many benefits of structuring your assets in line with the French tax and legal framework to hold so many benefits. Now, a really common savings instrument that we use is an assurance fee. I think 70% or so of the adult population in France have one. Now, essentially what we specialize in from outside of the US, again, remember that I'm talking separately on this subject. We specialize in alternative tax efficient vehicles for when you move to France. And an assurance fee simply is a great tool for that. And I'll touch on the benefits of that. But what's not tax efficient in France, like a UK ISA or an investment vehicle in your home country, for example, UK premium bonds. And that's exactly what we specialize in, is looking at alternatives. So if we're looking at an assurance fee, there's quite a long list of benefits to that, but main benefits really include tax efficient income withdrawals from the policy. Now, you're only taxed on the gain element of an assurance fee. There's a tax-free allowance after 8 years of holding an assurance fee. One of the biggest benefits is succession planning. If you, again, for example's sake, had £1 million in a UK ISA and moved to France and left it in there because you were happy with the way it was set up and it's generating you 6% a year, great. You pass away, your kids, 2 kids are your beneficiaries, they'll be taxed at a high rate, maybe 40% of inheritance tax in the UK. Establish that wealth, and you can do it in sterling, euros, US dollars, into an assurance fee. Both of those children I mentioned in the example will have a tax-free allowance of 152,500. Anything over and above that, up to 700,000, will be taxed up to 20%. Now, important point on that is generally have to be set up to benefit from the tax-free allowance before the age of 70. Again, look, I can go into so many different benefits of an assurance fee wrapper and why they might make sense, but they may not make sense to everyone. So similarly, like Eleanor mentioned, it's about having an initial sort of consultation or one-to-one meeting to see if and what might be suitable for you, how your assets are structured now, what your plans are moving forward, what your objectives are. And that's where we sort of formulate our advice. Again, there's no cost or obligation for a consultation or to even take our advice, but we're here to help. I think a big talking point at the moment is currencies. Jacob, especially with US dollars to euros and vice versa. We work closely with Smart Currency, one of the largest sort of currency companies within Europe, and they specialize in regular transactions and larger transactions for clients. So there's a real benefit of using a big currency company like that. I don't work for them, I work with them. I like what they do. They're a big organization. There's free account opening, there's no commission on trades. They make money off margins, but given the size of the company, it's better than trying to do it yourself. You have an expert trader involved, and you can look at things like forward contracts, especially if you're buying a house. That's the big one, right? If you have money from a property sale or assets in the UK or the US and are looking to buy in France, and you need to transfer over hundreds of thousands of into euros, then absolutely get a currency company involved. Do your own research, ask us for an introduction. It's a bit of a big talking point because timing on that in the last 6 months has been, astronomical. You're talking tens of thousands in a simple transaction just by using a currency company. As far as pensions, retirement planning, again, it says for UK expats. Big talking point I've had recently on this is UK expats moving to France, and a bit of back and forth with Lexity on this with certain clients. Certain pensions allow you to withdraw them fully as a full encashment with a reduced rate of 7.5% in France as a French tax resident. So it's something to keep in the back of your mind or have a conversation with us to see if you may qualify for that, because in France, you may be taxed at a flat rate of 30% on the income from a pension or from an overseas investment. That's the whole purpose of sort of restructuring your assets and making it a more tax efficient income source. Something to be mindful with, similarly to selling a house prior to becoming a French tax resident, is if you have the ability to take a tax-free lump sum, again, mainly talking about UK pensions, Irish pensions, similarly, take those as a UK resident or Irish tax resident. They'll be completely exempt from tax. If you do that as a French tax resident, they'll view that as worldwide income and tax you on that. There is a double taxation agreement, so you're never going to pay tax twice. We can look at alternative options on private and occupational pensions. Sometimes it's better to move those into international SIPs, for example. Overseas pension transfers are a thing of the past, but we can always compare how you have your pensioners currently to what we can advise and what may be best going forward. That's pretty much it. What we're trying to sort of generally look at from a financial planning aspect is greater control, flexibility, currency flexibility, and tax efficiency, not only from an income point of view, but from a succession point of view. And there's so many benefits in France that we can happily run through with you to give you an idea. And whether that potential move is 3 weeks away or 3 years away, we'll always be happy to send you information to give you an idea of how things may look. Jacob, we'll move smoothly on to the US, and I'll pass it over to you to give people a bit of an insight into how that looks. It's slightly different, obviously, to what I touched on.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Remy. Yeah, I mean, all what Remy said is great and doesn't apply at all to US expats. That is for pretty much everyone else. There are still some big advantages for France, especially compared to other EU countries for US citizens. The big one is some of those provisions in that dual tax agreement that really says for any type of investment income, retirement account distributions, that you're taxed in the States as opposed to in France, and looking at some of those very scary progressive income tax rates that you see on all the headlines. And yeah, your other income, right, when you're a French tax resident, is going to be taxed along those progressive tax rates. But hopefully, particularly for retirees, it can be even more attractive as you're living off of some of your retirement, all of your career, saving up for your retirement, you're living off of those accounts. That's going to be most likely very beneficial in France over other EU countries. One other beneficial thing for Americans over other countries, I would say, is the ability to set up an annuity that actually pays something to you, particularly right now in the high interest rate environment, to be able to qualify for some of those long stay visas. Really showing that guaranteed income from the rest of your life from a reliable source can make it extremely easy to really meet some of those qualifications that Eleanor can go ahead and help you finish the entire application using some of that income. As we mentioned already, right, selling the house in the tax year that you're not a French tax resident, it's going to be huge for US citizens before they make the move to France, or in a year that, as Mona said, right, that you're not spending the most time in France over any other country. We have this 250,000 capital gains exemption, or 500,000 for a married couple. If you have a lot of capital gains in your house, that could make a huge tax implication if you're a French tax resident the year that you sell that primary residence. We want to make sure that you get those full exclusions, and being able to take off any type of, you know, improvements to the property at the same time on top of those exclusions, going to be extremely important. As long as we're on the subject of real estate, right, there's a lot of Americans with incredible amounts of real estate wealth. France could be tough on you for that. That wealth tax at 1.2 million starting. We're gonna want to make sure that if it makes sense, right, sell those properties before you become a French tax resident as well. And don't think having a trust is really gonna hide it. I know that a lot of Americans utilize trusts for both inheritance tax purposes and estate planning, but also for, you know, shoving something away for a rainy day, or you know, shoving something away for the grandkids. France does not always appreciate trusts, and it is higher. I see Mona laughing over there. It makes her job a lot more difficult. The tax rates are a lot higher. We, as Americans, we love using trusts, and they simply don't work in France. I'm sure Mona has potentially creative ways to reduce inheritance tax, but at the same time, it's always going to be a little bit higher as you're a French tax resident rather than being a US tax resident. Now, another challenge that American expats face is when they move abroad, most of the time, their current financial advisor can no longer help them. And their current institution can no longer have them as a client as they have a foreign address. And so that's really, you know, where myself can come in. Be that financial advisor. We are dual licensed on both sides, so certainly happy to help. Now, that's not to say, right, that we're going to move assets to France necessarily. That Assurance V that Remy was talking about is such a great tool for non-US expats. For US expats, right, it's what we call a PFIC, or passive foreign investment company. It's going to increase your tax filing costs back in the US. It's going to have negative tax consequences and just be a huge headache for your CPA back home, who will probably fire you as a client before you can even file. But it's certainly something that we want to make sure to avoid. We do have definitely ways of moving assets offshore outside of the United States. I'm getting that request more than I ever have by far, as I'm sure some of you can imagine. You know, with the current administration, right, there's been more Americans moving than ever, and certainly a lot of Americans who want to move assets outside of the States. So we can certainly do that. We just want to be careful about where those assets are located and what they're actually invested in, to make sure that we're really checking off all the boxes to be in compliance.
Think you're frozen there, Jacob. I'll jump. Oh, there you go. You've come back. We missed the last 10 seconds. Carry on.
Well, I was just saying, I don't necessarily need to repeat you too much there, but the currency between the US dollar and the euro, it's 15% down year to date, with a little bit further of a slide yesterday. So those numbers are actually before it dropped, I think, another 2% potentially yesterday after that trade deal. And so that forward contract, you're buying a house, your assets are in the States, We want to make sure that gets into place. It can be up into a year in advance. It could make I mean, I've had clients, right? The property buying process in France can take 3 months to a year, depending on the property. And so we really want to make sure that we lock that in as an exchange rate, so the house doesn't end up costing you another 15+%, like some of my clients have already had this year. So certainly something that we want to keep in mind. Remy, that's my scary notes for the day. Again, as everyone has already heard, please feel free to schedule a free consultation. Happy to take a look at your particular scenario, and so that we can find what's going to be the best solution for you.
Appreciate that, Jacob. Without sort of scaring people off too much, there's obviously a lot to sort of run through, and this is quite generic information, but we really want to dig deep into all the sort of implications of a potential move, right? Again, just to reiterate, we welcome the idea of having a free consultation. Here's some contact details. Feel free to take a picture on your phone. If you are a US citizen, use Jacob's QR code, pretty please. If anyone else, use mine. You've got Mona's and Eleanor's direct email addresses. If you've got any questions, any queries, if you want to set up a meeting, please feel free to reach out to the guys. They would be happy to help. Maybe we should skip back to this page on why we moved to France. Because look, the tax implications can be a tricky subject, but that's why we're here, right? We want to help with that pre-planning to make sure everything's smooth and make sure your assets essentially are set up in the best way possible. The purpose of our consultation, speaking on behalf of myself and Jacob, will be to sort of follow up on an introduction. I'm sure you've heard us speak for 35, 40 minutes and you'll be bored of us, but the purpose of that call will be to run through a bit of a fact-finding process to see individual requirements, objectives, income analysis, and look, we'll prepare any recommendations or advice off the back of that meeting. There's no cost, there's no obligation. We're happy to help if we can. And similarly, I'm sure Eleanor and Mona will be happy to answer any questions, or even if you know anyone thinking of moving, considering it, please pass on our information. A few questions popping up. First one's on visas. How much should a long stay visa cost to obtain?
Yeah, it depends on where you apply from and the consulate, because some consulates use a private company for the visa application handling, and depending on them, you have a fee. But for British citizens, we are around the equivalent of 50 euros for the appointments. Where in the US, it changed recently, and now we are more around like $200 just for the appointments. And then once you have your visa in your hand and after arriving in France, you have a government tax of 200 euros. And this is valid for every type of long-term visa.
Okay. Perfect. We had a question about annuities. I wasn't sure whether it was a UK-based question or American, but they said, what will the benefits of annuity be and what options available? I'll quickly answer that from a UK perspective, because it's very, very, very rare that we recommend taking an annuity type option. Simply they die with you and the rates just aren't very good. I'll pass it over to you, Jacob, because I think they're a bit more attractive from a US point of view.
Yeah, they definitely are. It's been a really big tool in this high interest rate environment. We're able to generate a pretty significant portion of lifetime income that's guaranteed by the insurance companies that back them. Now, that's one tool, is the income side. We also have some structured products, right, that can be a 0% floor on the S&P 500, which is great since we've hit some all-time highs and we can really lock that in now. Or at the same time, I should say, we get 85% of the upside of the S&P 500. And so really by using some of these products that are called annuities, act more structured products, we can either generate income on one side, or we can grow your assets for the long term. And so, yeah, the US side are so much different than annuities on the UK side, which at this time, Remy, I don't think you'd agree, or the UK side's practically worthless. But the US side has been a really useful tool for a lot of clients.
Okay. We had a few currency questions. I sort of hope we covered that. I will be sharing a follow-up email. Someone asked about recordings as well. Just to be clear, this is a recording event. We'll be sending a copy of the recording to your emails. I will put everyone's contact information on the email follow-up. We'll put a link for a currency account to open a free account with Smart Currency. Feel free to take them up on that offer. It's a free account. Once you register for an account, you'll be contacted by an account manager who will liaise with you on any sort of trades or plans you wish to do from a currency perspective. Again, we urge you to take us up on these free consultations. These are links directly to myself and Jacob's diaries. That will be a Zoom call automatically in your diary, whatever time you select. Any details or information is always useful on the booking page. So as I said, get your cameras out, take a picture of that, follow the link, follow the instructions, book a suitable time, and we're happy to have those conversations. That's pretty much it. Any sort of follow-up comments, guys? Really, really appreciate your time. I understand it's been a long day here. Been in the office since 8 a.m. We're getting towards 7 p.m. here in Spain. Any final comments, Jacob?
No, just don't be strangers. Feel free to reach out. Or I know that all four of us are happy to help.
Eleanor, yourself, appreciate your time again.
Be sure to prepare about your long stay visa, and make sure that you know the timings and the document that you need, because you cannot imagine how many people arrive with little problems that can be avoided just with a call beforehand. So really don't hesitate to reach out to me or Muna, and we'll be more than happy to give you a hand.
Muna, first webinar, a natural. Appreciate your time today. Any lasting comments?
Thank you very much. I just want to say that taxes have tendency to be scary, but the only solution is to plan ahead. So let's be smart about it. That's it. And as Eleanor mentioned, we do 15 minutes free of charge to try to help you out. So please do not hesitate.
Well, I don't think taxes are too scary, because someone like yourself deals with them, and that's exactly what everyone should be doing, right? But look, any queries, any questions, get in touch with us, guys. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar, and over and out from here. Thank you so much.